Good morning. Well, I got my X-Carve back a few months ago. Inventables actually sent it to me if I would do an assembly and a review on it. It didn't cost me anything, but well, I've really enjoyed using it. It's a very accurate machine, and you know, I can use it to cut sort of intricate parts, and you know, parts that need to be two parts that need to be exactly the same, or whatever. It's very precise. I used it to cut the parts for my sharpening system, and you know, several other projects around the shop. But and I also use it for my wooden tankards to cut the handles out. It just it really cuts down time on the bandsaw, having to cut the parts out on the bandsaw and then coming back and file off all the saw marks. So I use this. It really it minimizes the sanding and things like that on those handles, and that's primarily what I use it for. But I came out last week and I found that I was gonna cut some of those handles, and when I got started, it wasn't working right. With every pass that it would make, it would move to the right and move back a little bit, so it never followed the same path. And well, I got on the forums and things like that, and I went through all the tune-up and everything again, checking all the wheels, all these wheels, you know, and making sure that they're not too tight, making sure that they're tight enough but they're not too tight. Checked all the belts. Belts are good. The problem that I ended up having, and it took a little bit of digging, was my spindle. And I would have never thought of this myself, but my spindle here, this spindle right here that came with the X-Carve, it's a 300 watt spindle. It's very powerful for its size. It really is, and it worked good for a long time, or for a few months anyway. Problem is that spindle can begin to interfere with the computer controls, or the electronic controls for the X-Carve. So when you would turn the spindle on, there would be some electrical interference in the control for it, and what would end up happening would be it would take a step every now and then to one side or the other, front and back, whatever. I don't know if it affected the Z axis, up and down. I really don't know that. I think it did, but I'm not really sure. But I know it affected the X and the Y. So, man, I took and I got on that forum, or actually I went through the help, and I finally found a thread on that forum, or whatever, that said, that told me that the spindle was interfering with the machine, and the only fix for that is spindle replacement. And well, I was kind of disappointed because, you know, the spindles aren't really cheap. I mean, they're not expensive, but they're not really cheap, and you know, it was just going to be money that I was going to have to fork out. But I got to thinking, well, I've seen people use trim routers. Seen people use trim routers on their X-Carves, and the system here, I got the small one because I don't have room for one of the big ones in my shop. I could have had one of the larger ones, but I just opted not to get that. This one right here is plenty big enough for anything I'm going to do in here. But the spindle, using a router, this is still very rigid. The whole frame, everything's still rigid. This router only weighs like 3.5 pounds, so it doesn't, it doesn't overtax the maker slides or anything like that. So anyway, but a couple problems that I've run into with my X-Carve, it wasn't was that spindle, and I've also run into problems with the bottom here, the waste board. The waste board developed a bow in the bottom over time, and I really didn't think about it when I put it together, or I would have addressed that at that time. But here in the center, it started just sagging. So when I would try to cut something, it'd be cutting deep, in the front end here, and as it would make that first and second pass, it may not even be cutting back here. So all I did there, and I went ahead and fixed it, was let this thing come back. All I did was I just added in supports, MDF supports. I cut them all the same as this extrusion here, and I glued them in, clamped everything down, and that really stiffened that board up, made it flat and stiffened it back up, so it cuts really good again now. But I fixed that, and I replaced the spindle, and I'll show you how I did that right now. And I also did a little project, and I'll show you how I did that. Alright, well, let's get this thing started. We're fixing to upgrade this thing and give her some performance enhancers. Okay, well, I designed my new mounting brackets in easel so I can cut them out on the X-Carve. It was fairly simple design. It's basically 2 mounting brackets with the holes cut in it that will fit my router. It's a 2.5-inch hole. Then I cut it out with my X-Carve. I'm using my Dremel tool as my spindle, and it really worked surprisingly well. It worked as well as the other spindle did. So this is an alternative if you would like to do this with your Dremel. I used about a 1/16 inch shim that wrapped all the way around the Dremel, and it drops right into the standard spindle mount and tightens up very securely and square. Cuts really well. I was really surprised at how well it did. But then I removed it. I took it back off once I got my parts cut, and in order to remove the mounting bracket, start by taking out your Dremel or your spindle. Take off your wheels, your eccentric wheels and everything. And I used a piece of plate steel here that I cut off of a treadmill frame. I just cut it the same size as the spindle mount. I gave it a little bit of extra length too. And now I'm marking for my screw holes, including the Delrin nuts. I have 4 wheels and my Delrin nuts. 2 eccentric nuts, 2 stationary wheels, and 2 Delrin nuts. I used the rip fence on my drill press to ensure accuracy drilling the holes, to get them the exact same distance from the edges, and it worked out really well for me. And I just kind of checked to see if the spindle mount and my new mounting plate, make sure the holes all line up properly, and they did. I didn't have a a diagram to go by, so I just had to do that. Now I need to mark for where my mounts need to go. I'm just going to mark it at the top, staying away from the screws and the wheels and things like that that have to have adjustment and all that. So I wanted to stay away from those. So I just mark it right there, and then I'll square it off. Just square it off with my combination square, both lines, and then I'll drop down 3/8 of an inch, which is half of my mounting bracket, and I'll square those lines off. That's where my screw holes will be. It'll mount just like that. Now I have to drill my screw holes and drill them out. Make sure you countersink these. I use oil before I countersink the holes. I'm just using a countersink bit. Taper those holes off, because these are wood screws that are going through here. Okay, now just getting that mounted, checking for square, just double checking everything to make sure that it's gonna be square in the mounts. Very good. And then we'll screw the mounting plate to it. I did pre-drill these holes in the maple mounting brackets. So these holes have been pre-drilled. We'll put the top one on, and then we'll move to the bottom one. Make sure that this thing stays square. If it doesn't stay square, your router may be tilted to one side or the other ever so slightly. Remount the plate back on your X-Carve. Double check the wheels, make sure the tension is correct on the wheels. It will cause problems if you don't. Use the eccentric nuts to loosen the wheels or tighten them, and then just tighten it all down. All this in the instructions. And there it is. It's ready for the router. It'll sit in here. It's a very tight fit. It's very snug in there. It doesn't actually tighten until I put the screws in. I just screw it in. Now I've got the torque set on my drill so that I don't wring these heads off or break the heads off the screws. I just set the clutch about midways. These are 3-inch screws that I'm using here, but we'll just do the top and the bottom. And this really turned out very rigid. I'm planning on doing these same mounts out of aluminum, but these right here were held very securely. And once I get them tightened down, I'll go back and torque them all to the clutch of the drill, just to make sure that they're all the same tightness. And that's that. Now we're ready to test. We'll home it out, make sure nothing's hitting anything or touching anything. Okay, now we're ready to fire it up, get her going. I'm doing this Georgia Bulldog sign for my brother. He's giving it to his friend, and I thought it would be a good test of this new spindle. It's got a lot of open space, it's got a lot of cutting to do, but also a lot of precision also. So that's the design that I chose. I was just doing this little sign. Spindle worked out great. Worked out great. Here it's making kind of a cleaning pass at the end of the carving, and it really cleaned it all up nicely. Bottom's nice and flat, so that tells me the spindle is sitting true. A lot of care taken in getting this thing squared up. It performed very well. And now I have a very strong router replacing that spindle there. So I think I'm good to go. All right. Well, all right then. Well, what I've done is I've got me a temporary here. Actually, if I knew that it was going to be as stiff as it is, I would have probably made it a little bit more pretty. But I designed these as a temporary so that I could cut it out with my Dremel. I didn't really trust my Dremel to cut on this piece of aluminum that I have, which is right here. Okay. This is a 9-inch aluminum disc. It's 15/16 inch thick, and that's what I'm going to cut my permanent mounts out of. But that thing's really heavy. I mean, really heavy. So I don't know. I may end up not using it, but we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. By the time I cut out my pieces, it really shouldn't be very heavy, but we'll see. But anyway, I've upgraded to my Makita router. Now, Inventable sells a mount for the DeWalt 611 trim router, and but they don't sell one for Makita, and I wasn't going to go buy a dedicated router for this and not knowing that it was going to work or anything. But this works great. The my little sign that I did for the Georgia Bulldogs, Georgia Bulldog sign, looks really good. I went ahead, I've done a little sanding on it and stuff. Just took a minute or two. The cuts are almost, well, they're about as perfect as it gets, I guess. Not really, I'm not really CNC savvy, but that cut looks pretty good right there. And and anyway, I was doing that just to test it and see how it would do, see if I get wobble or anything like that. Using a 1/4 inch bit really strengthens everything up. The router is a lot more powerful than my spindle was, and I think I'm really going to like this. Plus, it's not permanent mounted in here. I can loosen my screws and I can take out my trim router and use it somewhere else. I don't have to have a dedicated router for this thing, because when you tighten these down, it tightens perfectly into this circle that was cut out. And well, that just, that makes it repeatable. I can put it right back in there and it's the same every time. So anyway, I really like it. The folks at Inventables, they're very helpful. They helped me get through this little problem. And the people on the forums, people who have had these problems before. And this is just kind of a video log of how I fixed my problem. And, bring it kind of to the front what can happen to these spindles. Because apparently it's happened to others before. And if you're not really looking for that thread, if you're just kind of looking to see what's going on, I just stumbled across this problem and the solution for it. But once I did, I took this out and this thing worked perfect. I just mounted a pin, a pin on here, Sharpie, and to see if it would run the same path. And with this turned off, it ran the same path perfectly. So, I knew that was my problem. But anyway, I got my upgrade done. Much more powerful. It's just as stable as the other. The framework of the X-Carve is still just as strong as it ever was. Like I say, this router's only like 3.5 pounds. It's not like it's a real heavy weight. It looks kind of big and bulky on there, but it's a 1.25 horse router also, so it will cut. And but the folks at Inventables, they sent it to me and they wanted honest reviews. I know this is several months later, but this is my continued review, I guess. People who are looking to buy this machine, it's worth the money. It is. It's not a heavy duty type CNC machine. If that's what you're looking for, you're not looking for this machine here. Okay, this is a hobby machine, and it can cut aluminum. It can cut, all the different types of woods, multiple materials. I saw one video where a guy was cutting steel, but it just took forever. I don't think it's not really designed to cut steel. It's actually designed to carve wood. People make parts and stuff out of it anyway, though. But a lot of the problems that I've seen people having with these things were all addressed in the instructions. The wheels, these wheels have to be able to turn with a little force, from your fingers. The belts, they need to sound like a low tone guitar string. This kind of stuff. It's stuff that was all addressed in the instructions, and people are actually complaining about the setup not being proper on these things. Complaining about how it works when they didn't actually follow the instructions to the letter. And I've never had problems with my X-Carve except for these two problems I brought up. The wasteboard got bowed. It needs support up under the bottom. So if you buy one or you have one, if you'll just cut some MDF strips or something to shore up the bottom of your wasteboard, then you will have no problems with that anymore ever again. And then the spindle. I don't know what happened with the spindle. I don't know what the problems are with it or whatever. But this upgrade right here, I already had the trim router, so this upgrade didn't cost me hardly anything. This little piece of plate steel that I used on the back here is about an 1/8 inch thick. It's not as thick as the aluminum piece that was there, but it's just as strong or stronger. And it came off that old treadmill that I tore apart last year. It was part of the frame. I just cut it out and I had me a nice piece of steel there. This was a piece of scrap maple that I had in the shop. You know, and I used 3-inch screws here, and I used 1 1/4 to mount it all to the plate. So, but anyway, those are the improvements that I made to my X-Carve. Easel is getting better and better all the time. It's been a few months since I used easel. Actually, it was my wooden tankard mugs video that I did last year was the last time that I actually used this thing. But and I brought up easel and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You know, they've got a lot more stuff on here. So easel's it's becoming more and more powerful program, and it's still free. It's online, and you know, you don't have to install anything or anything like that. But if you're looking to get into some type of CNC carving or anything like this is a good machine. And it's a good machine, especially for the price. With that, I'm going to let you go. Oh yeah, it's been a while since I did a video. It's just all because I've got this show coming up this weekend. It's Saturday at the Clarence Brown Conference Center in Cartersville. It's an 8-hour show, 9 to 5. And if you guys, anybody wants to come by and look at what's going on down there, it's the Cartersville Women's Expo and Artisans Exhibit. So stop by. I'd like to meet you, and we'll see y'all later. With that.